She didn't plan to admit it that night. If you had asked her even an hour earlier, she would have laughed it off, changed the subject, or found a way to disappear into some distraction. She had built an entire life around not saying it out loud, around pretending it was smaller than it really was, around convincing herself that if she never named it, maybe it wouldn't fully exist. But denial has a strange way of cracking when you're tired enough. And that night, she was more tired than she had ever been. It started with a simple conversation. Nothing intense, nothing dramatic, just words exchanged in a quiet space where silence felt heavier than it should. She felt it building inside her, that familiar pressure in her chest, the one she had learned to ignore for years, the one that showed up whenever the truth tried to rise to the surface. Usually, she could push it back down. Usually, she could distract herself with logic, with excuses, with anything that sounded reasonable enough to believe. But something about that moment felt different, like the walls she built inside herself had grown thin without her noticing. She remembers staring at her hands, feeling her heart beat in her fingertips, hearing every tiny sound around her like it was amplified. And then came the realization that scared her more than the truth itself. She was done running from it. Not because she suddenly felt brave, not because she had all the answers, but because carrying it alone had become heavier than the fear of saying it out loud. For years, she had replayed the same internal arguments. You can live without admitting it. You can keep this hidden forever. No one needs to know. And maybe that was true. Maybe she could have kept going like that for the rest of her life. But somewhere along the way, hiding it stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like a prison she built herself. Her voice almost didn't work when she finally spoke. The first few words came out quieter than she expected, like her own body was still unsure if this was really happening. The moment stretched, suspended between who she had always pretended to be and who she was about to admit she really was inside. And once the first piece of truth left her lips, something inside her shifted. Not relief, not panic. Something stranger. Something heavier and lighter at the same time. She expected the world to react. She expected everything to feel different instantly. But the room stayed the same. The air didn't change. Time didn't stop. And that almost made it harder, because she realized something shocking. The truth had always been real, whether she said it or not. The only thing that changed was that now she wasn't carrying it alone in complete silence. What she admitted wasn't dramatic to anyone else. There was no explosion, no moment where everything collapsed around her. But inside, it felt like standing at the edge of something she had avoided her entire life, because admitting it meant accepting that this part of her wasn't temporary, wasn't a phase, wasn't something she could just bury deeper and forget. She thought she would feel exposed. Instead, she felt still, like her mind had finally stopped fighting itself for the first time in years. The constant background noise of denial, fear, and overthinking quieted just enough for her to hear something she hadn't listened to before: her own honesty. Later that night, when she was alone again, she expected regret to hit. She expected panic, that familiar voice telling her she had made a mistake, but instead, she felt something unfamiliar. Space. Not freedom, exactly, not yet. But space to breathe without constantly watching her own thoughts. Without rehearsing every sentence she spoke, just to make sure she didn't accidentally reveal too much. She realized then that the hardest part had never been the truth itself. It had been the years of pretending it wasn't there. The energy it took to hide, to redirect, to live carefully around something that was always part of her anyway. And for the first time, she wondered how different her life might have felt if she had admitted it sooner, not to others, but to herself. She didn't suddenly become fearless after that night. She didn't suddenly share everything with everyone. But something important had changed. The truth was no longer something chasing her from the shadows. It was something she could look at directly, even if it still scared her a little. And maybe that's why that night mattered so much. Not because it changed who she was, but because it ended the long, exhausting war she had been fighting inside her own mind. She finally admitted it. And in that quiet, almost invisible moment, she realized something she had never understood before. Sometimes the scariest truths aren't the ones that destroy you when you say them. Sometimes they're the ones that finally let you breathe.